Hello, and we are live. The Rotoworld Fantasy Baseball Q&A. I'm Eric Samulski, joined, as always, by James Schiano. James, talk to me about your Mets, my friend. You were at the game last night. A great win. Looks like a crowd that could have been potentially a little bit better.
Yeah,
But,
that's been the story.
But, a great win, come from behind-ish. Big hit from Jose Iglesias, who's going to be starting at shortstop for the foreseeable future. Seemed like a good one to be at.
Great one to be at. Iglesias is platooning right now with Luis Angel Acuna somehow at shortstop for the Mets as Francisco Lindor is back, which is so funny. We've gotten to this point now in the last 2 weeks of September, and there's a chance Luis Angel Acuna could steal 3 bases and swing a rotisserie category in the league. Mets aren't stealing bases anymore though, but Citi Field was great. It wasn't that good of a crowd, which really did become the story. I even tweeted about it too, and I quote tweeted a journalist, Disha Thosar, who tweeted about it, and she got crushed for saying it. And then I tweeted, and people were like, "Yeah, you're right. More people should be there." I was like, "Okay," because we have slightly different followings here. But yeah. Then a lot of the Mets people came out today and were like, the crowd was bad. I think that there's a difference between getting paid to be at a baseball game and complaining there's not enough fans there, and then just going to a baseball game complaining there's not enough fans there. I think that might lose the conversation a bit. That. Yeah, but
let's also, I'm sure there are other factors at play. Of why it's easy to get criticized online for things that you say, depending on who you are, where you're from, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I mean, I saw that, Upper Deck, Monday night, and
school.
Anything you want to say. Yeah, sure, school, whatever. Yeah. People are upset about the grimace seat. Who knows? But there's a big win for the Mets. They're up. On the Braves, the wild card spot. You also have the Diamondbacks losing, so they're gaining on that wild card spot. So it's nice. And then, listen, we got to talk about how the Detroit Tigers are somehow a game and a half out of the playoffs.
I saw it last night. I literally couldn't believe my eyes. Because they came back and they came back on Seth Lugo and beat. No, that was my AL Central's mixed up. No, they came back on Lugo and they beat the Royals. Yeah, as the Guardians came back on Griffin Jackson, beat the Twins. That's what it was. And I was looking at the standings late at night, just on social media after the game, and I was like, "What? Who put the Tigers in the playoff picture?" And this Tigers team, I have a good tweet here from Brendan Tuma of Underdog. He said that I think it was since August 11th, which we love arbitrary end dates. That the Detroit Tigers are 9th in baseball in WRC plus. They're number 1 in bullpen ERA, and they're 5th in rotation ERA over almost 6 weeks of baseball. So that's a team that's still under 20% chance per Fangraphs to make the postseason. But that's a fun story. I'd love to see this Tigers team make the playoffs. Just get some fresh blood in there.
Listen, the door was open. The Royals, the Twins, they've been struggling. The Red Sox decided they also wanted to struggle instead of capitalizing on the opening there. And the Tigers, they responded. And so, I'd maybe like to wait another year and see if the Tigers get in. I think, there are some young guys in the lineup that I think will get better. I think, Riley Green's going to get better. Kerry Carpenter, I like. I think Young will get better. I don't really know how I feel about Trey Sweeney long term. Maybe you see a better year from Torkelson next year. I don't think if the Tigers make it, they're a threat right now. But I think that there are pieces in that organization that could make them interesting, in the next year or so. Uncle Ted, who said what's up before, and what's up, Uncle Ted. Tyler Holton is a beast. He has been great. I've been writing him up in my waiver wire column as maybe the best reliever for fantasy over the last month that nobody is picking up. He's been opening some games, so he's been getting some wins. He's been getting some saves. He's just been utterly lights out. Herder has been great in a follower role. I really wanted to pick him up, but he gets the Orioles this week, and I couldn't do it. But he's been really valuable in leagues in the past because, again, that follower role, you get 4 or 5 innings, and you can steal some wins, and he's been really picking up a bunch of wins there. So that has been really impactful. And the Tigers, man, they're interesting. They're not a auto start, your pitcher against them, all that kind of stuff. But I do we have some questions, and it is time to talk about fantasy strategy, right? Obviously, if this is your finals week, and there are some leagues where this is the finals, A pitcher pitches for you, they're done. Cut them, move on, pick up somebody else, pick up a hitter, make sure your lineup is full, pick up a reliever. If you don't need starters, try to snag a save or a cheap win or something like that. But do not keep guys on your bench if you are done. To this next question from Sid, if next week is your finals week, or if you are just playing Roto and you're going through the whole season, start looking ahead to, especially with pitchers. Hitters, it's also the same. Like, are you going to play them or not? There's no stashing, right? If you're not going to use the guy, he does not belong on your team, right? Mm-hmm. And there's no more, oh, well, if I drop him, somebody else may pick him up. Whoever you drop this Sunday night or whenever your league does waivers, nobody's going to add them. It's done, right? So, like, feel free to drop. So Sid's asking if you would use Yamamoto and or Sonny Gray. They start next week in Coors. And so would you use them or would you look for streamers? I am inclined. I would really use Sonny Gray before I would use Yamamoto. We saw Yamamoto go just 4 innings last night. He might go to like 5 in his next start, which is against Colorado this week in LA. And then so maybe you're getting 5 innings out of Yamamoto next week in Coors. I just don't like if they push him more in the second start this week, it might change my view on that. If I think I could get 6 innings out of him, but I don't know. Like, he's looked fine since coming back, but if I'm not getting the length of the start, I'm not as willing to roll the dice in Coors.
Yeah, Coors just doesn't have the same punch this year because of how poor that Rockies lineup is. It's even worse against lefties. Neither of these guys are lefty, but that's neither here nor there. But I tend to agree with you, Yamamoto, where it seems like the Dodgers right now are fully and totally in cruise control. They just want to make sure he gets to the playoffs in bubble wrap, so they're not going to push him past any kind of adversity, any kind of stress that he could. So you might be sacrificing that win. Whereas Sonny Gray, as you're going on a month after he was pretty cold through the end of summer, has been tremendous. And the Cardinals just let him pitch ad nauseum because that's what they do as an organization. But I don't know. It still just comes from the whatever option you have. I'm still never going to be like, yeah, I can't wait to start this guy in Coors Field. You always have to see if there's anything else. Like even a neutral matchup with, say, a team like the like who's like the most neutral team, like maybe the Twins, maybe they're a hair above neutral. The Guardians, the AL Central just strikes me as neutral. Like maybe if you can get a game against any of these other teams with a pitcher that's mildly comparable to Sonny Gray, I still just don't want to have my fantasy championship relying on something that happens inside of Coors Field.
Yeah, I fully agree. I had mentioned I'd be more inclined to take the Sonny Gray start, but I think I'd rather move on from both of those guys. He did ask also, the second part of this question is, what's up with Nestor Cortez after his start in Seattle? The Yankees, the last I read, they were moving Stroman to the bullpen and Cortez was staying in the rotation. So that would set him up for a 2-start week next week against the Orioles and the Pirates. And even though the Orioles start isn't great, the Orioles have been struggling of late. And then you're pairing that with the start against the Pirates. However, that is on the literal last day of the season. And so you might get some weird thing where, like, if the Yankees have clinched and if they don't need the game, and then they call up Will Warren and he starts instead and they save Cortez. And it's like, you don't really know how that's going to pan out. But on the surface, I will take a 2-start week of Cortez against the Orioles and Pirates for a Yankees team that I think could give him 2 wins there.
Yeah, both of those starts would be at home too, which might change the nexus a little bit considering the Orioles. But Cortez is almost like you have to play these horrible games with yourself the last week of the season if your league runs this late. I know a lot of the Roto leagues do. So you're just playing this horrible game with your mind of who's going to start and when. And teams are not very open about their schedules because sometimes they don't even know. But a guy like Cortez, who the Yankees will almost guarantee not rely on for a start in the divisional series. I feel like, honestly, maybe let's see how Schmidt does these next 2, but I feel like they probably in a vacuum will say we trust Cole, Rodon, and Hill more, and we probably trust Schmidt more than Cortez. So you're comfortable, like you mentioned about Warren, to start Cortez that last Sunday of the season because you're not worried about anything with his arm for the next week. Like you're not worried about getting Nestor Cortez on the right schedule, whereas you are worried about Carlos Rodon and Luis Gil because they're going to be supposedly also pitching that weekend. Where those are guys that could maybe be shifted around, but a guy like Cortez, like you mentioned, Will Warren. Like they might get cheap starts against the Pirates in games that doesn't matter, that you could get 6 innings and a win for no reason.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is the weekly lineup league lock with pitchers the final week of the season is so difficult because you're trying to make sure you're starting pitchers on teams that are more likely to care throughout the whole week. But on Monday, you can't be exactly sure how that's going to work. You don't really want to start a pitcher who might get a start skipped, but you're not entirely sure who that pitcher will be. And you don't know what the offenses are going to look like, right? As teams start to clinch, you can see guys who are banged up sit and rest for the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really tough in those weekly lineup lock leagues. You're not going to get everything right. You just have to try to take the safest possible options and hope that, things break in your particular favor.
And some things could just happen that are totally out of your control. Like last week in the league, I went for 2 streamers. I tried to stream Austin Gomber on the road against the Tigers, and then Andrew Heaney was going to be on the road against the Mariners. The Rangers stuffed their rotation with a bunch of pitchers, Kumar Rocker, Jacob deGrom, Max Scherzer, and that pushed Heaney to pitch on 7 days of rest on Sunday. He didn't pitch very well. Austin Gomber was announced, I think, on Tuesday, right before his start, went on the paternity list. That's just something we could never have known. And his start went from on the road against the Tigers to at home against the Cubs. I then sat him at home against the Cubs and threw a quality start. So it's just, you can't really hold yourself to these things because so much is going to happen this last couple of weeks that are totally out of your control. You just have to not get frustrated about it because you just simply probably couldn't have done better with the decision making than you did.
And I picked like, on the flip side with hitters, I picked up Randall Grichuk in one league because he was supposed to get Gomber and Freeland in Coors. So I was like, okay, Grichuk is going to start 2 of 3 games in Coors, and I need power. And then all of a sudden, they're like, oh, actually, Senzatella is going to come back and start on Monday. And so now Grichuk's going to get 1 start. And so all of that kind of stuff, like you really just need to keep checking like over and over and over and over again. And you're gonna miss some things, but you just have to try to do the best that you can. We're getting some 2025 questions, which we will take as well. A lot of them Met-centric. But Cow Chat says, has Sean Manaea earned 2025 draft consideration? For me, the immediate easy answer is yes, of course. I mean, he's pitched so well this year that he 100% warrants being drafted. But then I also look at, like, I think, first of all, where he ends up will be a determiner of his value. It was a 1-year deal with the Mets. The Mets were a good landing spot for him. It is a good pitcher's park. We don't necessarily know where Manaea will end up. That will impact his value. But I do think, like, there was a massive pitch mix change for him this year. The last 2 years, and granted, he had been in like a hybrid role for the Giants, and so he had been pitching a little bit out of the bullpen, and so that does change pitch mixes. But he had been very four-seam fastball reliant. This year, he moved to a sinker, and he also went aggressively more toward the sweeper, but also added in a cutter. And granted, he's only throwing it like 7% of the time on the year, so it has not been like a major pitch for him. And he also, I don't even think he threw it in his first start in September. But the sinker has been just a better weapon for him than the four-seamer, and I like the fact that he's adding in the sweeper more, even though, obviously, as a lefty, he faces more righties. But I just think the pitch mix changes have worked for him. And so in addition to the success, I like the changes that led to the success. And so my fingers are crossed that he's going to a solid environment and not like winding up in Cincinnati or something.
Yeah, the thing that Manaea did that's so interesting and just fascinating and impressive is that he has been throwing that sinker, which he calls his two-seamer, high in the zone. Like he does what Hader does with it, where he gets such a low release point as a lefty, and he gets underneath that ball. The two-seamer acts like other pitchers' four-seamers, and he's throwing it up in the zone against both lefties and righties, and he's mixing in the changeup, especially against the righties, along with that cutter, and then just dropping as many sweepers as he possibly can against the lefties whenever he gets to face them. Because Manaea has a lot of games where he might face one or two other righties in the lineup, if not zero once in a while. The Red Sox game a few weeks ago, they started, I think, 1 left. He had a game a couple weeks ago where they started. It was 0 left. You started against him, but there's been real tangible changes here. Manaea is someone who I think has pitched himself into one of the biggest contracts anybody's pitched themselves into this season, especially in a weak starting pitcher market. His floor to me seems like a $20 million guy right now. Like that's what Eduardo Rodriguez got last year. Chris Bassett got $21 million 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're looking at someone who could get a 4-ish year deal at $22-23 million. And I don't know which teams could give that. He's also given like such incredible durability. Like I get not durability, but he's working so much. It's Rob DiPietro put out a tweet today. He has the 4th longest streak in the last 20 years of someone who's thrown 6 2/3 innings. It's 7 consecutive starts for Manaea right now. So what he's able to do with being so unique, because I think that weird low arm angle, high 2-seamer thing, no one does that because I don't think many pitchers are capable of doing that. He said he kind of picked up the concept from Sale when he watched Sale pitch against the Mets early in August, which I thought was really funny. But he's so unique right now. So maybe you get another year around the league and people are a little more ready for it and people are a little more prepared for it. But I think in terms of the May next year, like he probably gets drafted around SP 35 in a neutral landing spot. Like he's a guy you could probably, projections will probably give him 3.8 with a 1-2 whip, about a strikeout per 9. And the people argue those projections might be missing all the mechanical changes that he made in 2024. So I think he's someone who has jumped. You might if the landing spot becomes great, like there's a guy who could get like top 30 starting pitcher helium, I think, next year in draft season.
Yeah, and we've seen him be good before. The move to the sinker is also interesting because he's been so reliant on velocity with the 4-seam fastball. He was always one of those guys where it's like, if Manaea's 92 or under with his 4-seamer, like he's not going to be good. If Manaea's hitting 93, 94 with the 4-seamer, he's going to be good. The sinker has mitigated that a little bit because of not only just it having more movement, but where he's utilizing it. I think that's a better move for him long term because as he gets older, he doesn't have to worry about like, am I hitting 93, 94? And it gives him a little bit of a safer floor. So I really like that call. And then Uncle Ted also asked about another Mets pitcher, which is where are y'all drafting David Peterson in the main next year? So for the record, if you don't play NFBC formats, main event teams are 15-team leagues. So it's basically like in a 15-team format, shallow bench. So these aren't leagues where you can like really stash guys on the bench for like a long time. Generally speaking, where are you drafting Peterson? So I guess my first question to you is, as the resident Mets fan, do we think Peterson is a lock to be in the rotation next year? And then subsequent question is, if he is in the rotation next year, how confident are you in the production that you're getting from David Peterson, who we should remind people is 20, he will be 30 years old next year. It's not like he's some, we've kind of done this dance with him for a few years where it hasn't quite been consistent.
Yeah, Peterson is just your classic regression candidate when he gets to next year. He's running the lowest strikeout rate of his career right now while also the lowest ERA. It doesn't seem like that's possible to continue, but I also think that he is very likely to have a rotation spot because of one, how just amazing he's been for this Mets team. We're going on 3 straight months now where he's had basically one bad start. Like he's a huge reason they're even in the playoff race. And also 2, the Mets totally lack any starting pitching depth on their contract next season. Manaea's gone. Luis Severino's gone. I think Manaea will almost definitely not come back. Severino probably has a slight chance to come back because he hasn't been as outstanding as Manaea. But then past that, Senga, and then it's just it's going to be a little chaotic. See how the Mets wind up filling this out. I don't remember if Paul Blackburn's under contract. But these are the type of guys the Mets are going to be vying for to be in their rotation next year, depending on the moves they make on offense. So Peterson will have a spot. He will get drafted. But I think that the rooms will be so sharp that they'll see that he only has a 10% strikeout minus walk rate. They'll see all his expected stats are about 2 runs ahead of where his actual ERA winds up. He's someone who never had good command and has suddenly become a command artisan. And we've learned to not fully trust command year in and year out like we maybe once did because we know how erratic command could be. Peterson does have a reason that the command's gotten better. He had a hip procedure in the offseason. He said that's something that has been bothering him for years. He said it would help. It would force him to get much more fatigued and make him not as comfortable with his lower body and not be able to repeat his mechanics as well. He said now he's fixed that. All those things have gotten better. His velocity gradients in starts has gotten much tighter than it has been early in his career as a siren blows past my house. So he's someone who
it was going to fix David Peterson's hip.
Exactly. He I think that you should draft, if you're going to draft him next year, you should draft him as a guy who you're expecting to have an ERA around 4 rather than a guy you're expecting for an ERA around 3. And you probably can't rely on the strikeouts that much because it's a 5-pitch mix. He likes to mix and match, especially with the lefties and righties, but no pitch is super elite. But if he's commanding all of them, it works out really well. But that's something that we know just can oscillate so much month to month, game to game, year to year.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned the no pitch is super elite. I know Uncle Ted says Rhett Lauder is a stud, and I'm going to respectfully push back on that. Nick Pollock and I talked about Lauder on the Corner podcast, which you guys can listen to anywhere you get podcasts. We both kind of said it reminds us of Andrew Abbott last year, where Abbott came up with the Reds and had these great surface level stats, and everybody was like, "Well, how is that happening? Like there's nothing here that suggests he should be pitching this well." I understand that Rhett Lauder had good numbers in the minor leagues. He has a 10% swinging strike rate in his 4 starts. He has a 25.3% CSW. His K- walk rate is under 10%. The 4-seamer just does not miss bats. And the 4-seamer, I guess he doesn't give up a lot of hard contact on it. The sinker is another one. Obviously, sinkers don't generally miss bats. Doesn't give up a lot of hard contact on it. So he has a decent sinker and a pretty good slider, and that's kind of it. Like the changeup is okay, but the changeup has like a 42% ideal contact rate, so it's getting hit kind of hard. And the 4-seamer is fine. I mean, I guess Lauder doesn't have any bad pitches, but he also doesn't really have any great pitches. And so I think there is potential growth there if the slider continues to get better, or if he can add a third pitch to the sinker slider mix. But right now, I think he is a low 4 ERA type of pitcher in a bad home park. And so I'm going to be cautious on him the rest of the season and also going into next year. But I will say, like, that profile this week against the Pirates was enough for me. Like, I'm starting Lauder in some places against the Pirates.
Yeah, I think Lauder and Peterson will both benefit from having comfortability with throwing both a sinker and a 4-seamer. So they can mix those up a little bit better and can kind of keep hitters on both sides of the plate a little off balance and get a litewll more maybe soft contact, and someone who just only can throw one of those pitches, especially if it's a sinker. So I'm with you. These aren't guys I'll be overdrafting next year, but also not guys I think I'm fully willing to ignore. Probably more Peterson instead of Lauder, just simply because of the home park.
Yeah. Lou is saying, speaking of Detroit, he added Parker Meadows when Gurriel was injured. When Gurriel returns, he'll have 6 outfield-only eligible players in a 5 outfield league. Michael Harris, the second James Wood, Parker Meadows, Byron Buxton, and Pete Crow Armstrong. Where would Gurriel rank? And so if we go to that, Gurriel next week, well, Gurriel's going to come back this week, I assume. He was supposed to come back like any day now. But the next week, if we're looking at that, they get the Giants and the Padres. The Diamondbacks do. So they're set to face Hayden Birdsong, Logan Webb, Robbie Ray, Martin Perez, Yu Darvish, Michael King. Those are some good pitchers. Like Birdsong, obviously not great, but going up against Logan Webb, Robbie Ray, Yu Darvish, Michael King, like that's not something I love for a hitter who I think is fine but not great and has missed some time. So I don't know. I mean, like I might put I might put Gurriel like 6th of all these guys because I mean, Pete Crow Armstrong has been great, and even if he's not hitting in a week, his speed gives you immediate value. I think Buxton and Gurriel are the bottom 2 for me, and I think I would just rather have Buxton in my lineup, especially because the Twins get Miami for 3 games next week.
Yeah, I think Gurriel's kind of solidly the 6th guy in that mix. Also, because Parker Meadows has been amazing. He's played 35 games, he's being called back up, 300 average, 900 OPS, 5 homers, 5 steals, 21 RBIs, 21 runs scored. That is a a superstar level month from Parker Meadows, someone who was kind of an afterthought after how horrible his April was. Even Michael Harris has also been bad for months now, but similar to what you're saying about Pete Crow, like he'll just steal you a few bases. He's going to be, I mean, I don't know. Is Gurriel going to play every day too? Like even if he misses 1 or 2 games in that mix, like that puts him even more behind all of these guys who seem like maybe Buxton gets it a day here or there, but the Twins can't really give Buxton load management days anymore because they have to win as many games as they possibly can to just make the playoffs. Like he's going to play a full week. Next week is a full week he has to play. I think I can't find one argument for Gurriel over any of those guys right now.
Right. And also, like, I know that Pavin Smith isn't great, but he's been hitting well enough. He's hitting well enough that against a right-handed pitcher, they may go, oh, we'll just keep Pavin in the lineup for this one. So I think your point that Gurriel might not start every game is also a really good one. The Parker Meadows thing is killing me because I wrote that, like, who is this year's Josh Lowe, which is a funny article because obviously Josh Lowe then fell on his face this year. But the idea was like a prospect who didn't show out in their first taste of the majors, who's going to have a breakout 2024. And my finalists were Zach Neto and Lawrence Butler, who I didn't give the award to because I gave it to Parker Meadows, who obviously was atrocious and hurt for basically the entire season. But it's nice to see him kind of like have this uptick here. And I will definitely be jumping back in on Parker Meadows next year. I really like the talents. I might not be jumping back in on Reed Detmers, who's the biggest fantasy trap ever. I have been in on Reed Detmers for years, just years. And it has never materialized the way I thought it would when he was coming up through the ranks. And a buddy of mine who, asked me for some fantasy advice regularly, was heading into his fantasy championship and was thinking about picking Detmers up off the wire. It was like a 2-week fantasy championship. So this was like a week and a half ago that he was going to do this. And he wound up not going with Reed. He texted me, he said, it would be extreme Reed Detmers to pitch well against the Dodgers and Twins and then fall on his face against the White Sox, right? And I said, yes. He didn't pick up Reed Detmers. His opponent picked up Reed Detmers and played Reed Detmers yesterday. And I was like, it's just kind of like addition by subtraction. It's unfortunate. I root for him. I think there is a really good pitcher in there. I just don't know that he's in the organization to get that really good pitcher out.
Yeah, I was Detmers yesterday. I didn't have him in my lineup. It's a dynasty league. We have a pretty deep pitching staff, and it was a 1-start Bryce Miller at home against the Yankees versus the 2-star Detmers, White Sox in Houston. And I was in Citi Field yesterday. It was about 6:29, and I was like, you know what? I'm just going to make the switch. I'm just going to do it. I'm going to get the extra start once against the White Sox. I can't say no to the White Sox start. And he proceeds to give up 4 batted balls over 400 feet. He got hammered. There were no swings and misses. It was just a complete and other disaster. I was watching it unfold, and the guy, my friend I'm playing against, texting me, just completely trash talking me. I'm like, I can't believe it's happening. I can't believe the White Sox are going to be the team that possibly sinks me in this league where I know I have the best team. And it's just, that's it. Sometimes we get a little too granular and we get a little too cute with these things late in the year, and everything gets so magnified that feels much worse. But I don't know, process wise, I just can't be mad for going for a 2-starter. One was coming against the White Sox and someone who had just pitched well for a few starts in a row. But it's just a reminder that we can never be perfect in this thing.
No, you can't. And you always have to, guys who are inconsistent will likely be inconsistent, right? So that's just an aspect to continue to use in your evaluation. And I think that sometimes we get so caught up on like what we expect people to do because of like he was crushing in the minor leagues. And so we were like the anticipation of like, when is Detmers going to get called up? When is Detmers going to get called up? And then he did. And then it wasn't all that great, is similar to like with Max Meyer earlier in the year. Like, why are the Marlins not calling up Max Meyer? Their rotation is trash. Max Meyer deserves to be in this rotation. Like, when are they going to call him up? He got called up and people picked him up like crazy, and he wasn't good because Max Meyer had problems as a pitching prospect. He wasn't great. But because the rest of the rotation was bad and we thought Max Meyer would be better, when weeks went on, it started to amplify the collective opinion of Max Meyer. And so sometimes I think we need to like take ourselves out of the collective narrative of like, what is this guy compared to this, or the collective like rooting for somebody, and say, okay, but what is the actual talent of the player. And sometimes that would not have stopped you in this case. Like, you were going to start Reed Detmers against the White Sox because they're one of the historically worst teams in baseball. But also, it shouldn't have surprised you that this was in his bag of tricks, because this has always been in Reed Detmers' bag of tricks.
Yeah, it's just it. Like, I don't know. Uncle Ted keeps telling us down here that you got to start guys in playoff hunts. Like, I guess you do, but you can't start everyone in a playoff hunt. You just can't do it. You
Right.
have to take these risks sometimes. You have to be able to do this. Like, I did one again last night. I was just tinkering. Tinkering's usually a bad idea, but I put the 2-star Tyler McGill in the lineup over a 1-star Nick Martinez in the 16-team league, and I was like, you know what? I'm just going to get the start. I'm going to be in Citi Field time. I'm going to watch Tyler McGill live. There's a chance that he stabs me through the chest 2 different times without knowing it. With he could lose a game for 1, my favorite team, and 2 for my fantasy team. Like, all of these things just that's why it's so much fun to be in these fantasy baseball races this time of year, because every single little micro decision is such a big impact.
Listen, and you want to start guys in playoff hunts, but like, let's go to just real quick. We'll go to the Fangraphs player rater over the last month. The 6th ranked pitcher is Bowden Francis. Not in a playoff hunt. Then you've got Edward Cabrera as the 17th ranked pitcher, not in a playoff hunt. Patrick Corbin somehow is the 19th ranked pitcher, not in a playoff hunt. Shane Baz, 22nd ranked player, not in a playoff hunt. Mackenzie Gore, 23rd ranked pitcher, not in the playoff hunt. DJ Hers, 24th ranked pitcher, not in the playoff hunt. Brant Herder, I guess they are in the playoff hunt. Nathan Eovaldi, 27th ranked pitcher, not in the playoff hunt. Like, with pitchers, it really is also about matchups and guys who are going to throw, right? Not in a playoff hunt and like might get pulled after 4 innings, like Garrett Crochet, is very different than not in a playoff hunt like Shane Baz and going to go 5 or 6 or whatever.
Same thing within a playoff hunt. You might get pulled after 4 because you're trying to get the rotation secure and ready to go. Like, all of these other, like, there's not one rule. There's no one size fits all for these decisions you have to make. Every single thing has to be done. Like, as you have to evaluate all these players in their individual situation. Even a guy like Robert Suarez, it seemed like so clear that he might lose the closer's role like after this weekend. He's blown 2 saves in a couple of weeks now. He has only gotten 1, I think, in 2.5 weeks. He seems like he's running out of gas. The Padres have so many other options. I stared at him on a roster on Sunday. I was like, do I drop him? Is he going to get the next save? And I was like, you know what? I'm not going to do it. The Padres are a team that seemingly will trust their guy and keep him moving. And first thing that happens Monday night, gets a save, 8 pitches. And I was like, okay, thank you for trusting. But my finger was on the button to get rid of him and go for like an Evan Phillips or something, someone who was much less guaranteed for a shot. So it's just, you're not always going to be right. You just have to live with the mistakes.
Yeah. Yes. It is. There is no one perfect answer for sure. Couch has asking an interesting question. Another 2025 question. If Mike Trout does in fact move out of center field, which he has said he's open to a position change, which is something I said before going into this year, like Shohei Ohtani is not there. Trout should DH more. But is that going to boost his career low stock, or is it going to be draft dependent? I think it boosts his stock in the sense that, like, I think there's slightly less injury risk if he's not out in the field. Now, slightly less doesn't mean none, because Mike Trout has hurt himself in myriad ways, and knee injuries and back injuries and all that stuff can creep up. But not having to play the field all the time will limit some of the wear and tear on his body, which will limit some of the exposure to injury, which will make him slightly more dependable, we believe. But I don't think you're plugging in like 120 games for Trout. Maybe if you like say do use the Tanner Bell's like SGP sheet, like say you give Trout maybe 90 to 100 games if he's DHing. Like, that feels fair to me. I think he could get that if he moves out of the field, but I don't think you're getting a full season of Mike Trout. So I still think there could be value, because some people are just going to say never, like, I'm never doing this again. But he has remained incredibly productive when he's been in the lineup. And so if he DHs and can stay in the lineup, you might get a solid season. But again, I still think that's like a 90 game season, nothing like more than that. But I don't know. Would you dive back in?
I don't think I can ever get hurt by Mike Trout again. I just don't really want to. It seems like there's not, you never want to like I don't know. It's just how badly are you going to keep trying to play through these injuries when you know every single year in, year out, your team has next to no chance of ever winning any baseball games? Like, truthfully, like that's not even a reflection on Mike Trout. It's more a reflection on the organization. Where how much can you just continue to go back to well with this guy? Where the injuries seem very real, but as they keep compounding, like what ceiling do we even expect from Mike Trout? Like you were anticipating what 90 to 100 games? What does that give you? 25 homers. The batting average has been dropping 260 with no steals. I don't know. Give me Kerry Carpenter. He's going to do that and probably a little bit better. Like, give me, I don't know, give me other bit. There's other players who can do that. What Mike Trout's going to do, and you're not going to pay for Mike Trout's name.
Well, I guess, I mean, but that all comes down to, are you going to pay for Mike Trout's name? Like, I think there are some people that are no longer going to pay for Mike Trout's name. You know what I mean? And remember, 10 home runs and 6 steals in 29 games this year. Like, I know you can't extrapolate that out, but the power is better than what Kerry Carpenter is going to give you in a per game basis. Again, we're not talking about full season, in a per game basis. His strikeout rate through the first 30 games was the lowest he's had since 2019. Like, I think there's a 260 batting average season in here where if he gets 90 games, he's hitting 25 home runs at a 260 batting average. Now the lineup around him is probably not going to be good, and so the counting stats aren't going to be great, and I don't think you're going to get that stolen base pace again. So, like, again, it is going to be dependent on if other fantasy managers in your room are just saying, I'm never taking him. Yeah. Like, look at what happened with Byron Buxton. Buxton fell so hard in drafts this year because people after a while were just like, I'm not doing this to myself anymore. And Buxton was a value when he was playing just because of how far he had fallen in drafts. I don't think you can take Mike Trout in the top 150 whatever picks anymore. Maybe not even in the top 200. But if you're in a league where he falls outside of the top 200, like, yeah, him not playing the field is going to give him more value at that kind of cost.
It's also funny. I feel like there's always such football does the thing more in a more exasperated way, but it happens in baseball draft rooms too, where there's such a difference between where guys go in like a home league that you're playing with your friends, your college buddies, versus like an NFBC format. And this happened in the dramatic way this past season with O'Neal Cruz, where O'Neal Cruz by March was being pushed up to the top, 70, top 5 rounds in a lot of these NFBC leagues, but in a home league, especially in like an ESPN or Yahoo, you could have gotten O'Neal Cruz outside the top 150 pretty easily. I think this will flip with Trout next year, where Trout will still get ranked highly on these other websites. He'll still get taken as like a top 10 round pick in the league you're playing with your friends. But these NFBC formats, everyone's been burned by Trout. Everyone knows there's no stolen base upside. Everyone knows how the playing time upsides get the injury. I mean, the injury risk is so tremendous too that he's going to be the guy who falls dramatically in those draft rooms. I guess similar to, I don't want to compare him to him, but it's a way similar like Chris Bryant has dropped the last 3 years, where he still has name value, right, but there's like the skill set you're getting is nothing anymore. But Trout's better than that. But I'm just saying, like, you're not getting any more steals. You're never going to get batting average. You're not going to be a good lineup. So it's like, what am I getting here? I'm getting some fun and an old MVP.
I was just saying, I don't even know if Chris Bryant has the name value anymore.
He did I think I was talking 2 years ago, Chris Bryant, right when he signed that Rockies contract.
Yes.
Where it's like, there's no trust here, but like, I don't know. Like, home league will be like 100, NFBC would be like 220. So that's just where Trout is. You just have to get in that draft room and say, maybe I need power and pick 200. Now I'm just going to have to do it.
Yeah, I get that. Couchhead also says, I don't want to hurt James as a fellow Mets fan, but I think Patrick Corbin is going to replace Manaea in our rotation next year, thanks to his serviceable second half, since the Mets love rebounding vets. You just slammed your head against the wall if that happened. That would be
what the Mets are going to do, and I know for a fact, it's guaranteed, the Mets are going to have Walker Buehler next year, because the Mets are going to become synonymous with these 1-year reclamation projects for pitchers, where you are injured, you are hurt, your value's at its lowest. You come to the Mets, you pitch for 1 year. We have proven it right now with Sean Manaea and Luis Severino. Jeremy Hefner and Eric Yeager is going to make these guys a ton of money. You come to the Mets, you rehabilitate yourself, you find a new pitch mix, you make some adjustments, and then you go back out there and you make your real money. So I think that we're now becoming the home for that.
And that's not. I mean, listen, that is not a bad strategy. It's great. It's not a bad strategy. Yeah. Because also it gives you the flexibility. Like, we were talking about this heading into the year, where I was like, all right, all of these guys are trade deadline assets. All of them. You can trade to a contender. If you become a contender, then you don't trade them. Right. But I don't think there's really and again, the Mets are a big budget enough team where if you sign Walker Buehler and Walker Buehler returns to some like NL Cy Young form and wants a big money contract, like you can give him that contract. You don't have to have him leave somewhere to get that money. You could take the 1-year reclamation projects, and it is the case of like, especially with pitchers, like if a pitcher is struggling and you unlock something that fixes that pitcher, and then you're willing to pay them what they believe their new value is.
Yeah.
A lot of guys are going to stay in an organization that they feel understands them and makes them better. I think that's a great strategy for the Mets going forward. And like, look, the Mets, they're going to get Senga for a full year next year. Fingers crossed, we assume, right? Christian Scott probably in that rotation for a full year next year. We talked about like maybe there's David Peterson in there. We don't really know. Brandon Sprout looks really damn good. He'll be 25 next year. Like he could be in that rotation.
He'll be in the scout timeline.
Yes. I don't know that it's going to be there for like Blake Tidwell. You got Dom Hamill, Mike Vassell, guys like that at AAA who are ready, but they're depth guys. But like, I think the Mets are, if they make one good, like solid free agent signing and you get Senga and Scott and another like could potentially be top half of the rotation starter, and then you back end it with guys like Peterson or McGill or, Brandon Sprout or whatever, like that's interesting to me. That's an interesting enough rotation.
Yeah, it feels good as a Mets fan that they can take these pitchers 1 year and do a lot of professional development with them and make these guys significantly better with a few tweaks. Like even Luis Severino, he's been throwing more sinkers this year by far than ever before. And they think that, I think I hypothesize that might even be something that's kept him healthy because you might be trying to overthrow a 4-seam fastball, trying to find that velocity, trying to find that vertical movement where you're not going to do that as much with a 2-seamer or a sinker. And that's how you can kind of stay within your body more. That he's using the sweeper to play off that. He's still using the 4-seam where he can. The changeup goes up and down, but it's so refreshing that the Mets are finding ways to get more out of guys rather than less. I give so much credit to Jeremy Hefner for that. One of the most underrated pitching coaches in the league.
And it's really happening throughout the whole organization. Like the lower levels, they're like pitching lab.
Baby.
It has worked. It is working. Michael Mendez says that he is down bad in the semifinals after 1 day. My offense slacked while his went the other way. So he's thinking pitching now to try to focus on. I would just say, like, let's not overreact to 1 day. You obviously don't have time.
Unless you're losing by 5 homers or something.
Right. Yeah. You don't have time to wait in a semifinal, but also we want to give ourselves a little bit more of a sample in terms of drastically changing the way our roster looks. You want to have, I assume your league has transaction limits because most head-to-head leagues have transaction limits. So you want to be careful of burning too many of those early in the week, because if you get back into it on Friday and you only have like one move left for the whole weekend, it really kind of hamstrings you. I would try to wait and see, unless you're dealing with like injuries, or unless, as James said, you're like down real bad in one category. I would try to wait, a couple days to see how is the matchup shaking out. And again, if you had a pitcher throw yesterday and he's not throwing again this week, like you can move on, you can make that transaction. But I would caution against overreacting too much to just 1 day in the week.
Unless it's a disaster.
His follow-up is worth having any bench spots for batters during playoffs. And yes, totally. Because you cannot take zeros. You have to get at bats. If you're in a head-to-head format, you have to make sure you're getting at bats. That is the most valuable stat, or one of the most valuable stats, even though it's not a counting stat in your league. So you need bench spots because you need to be able to say, oh, somebody is sitting. I need to make sure I fill in that roster spot. And that's why, like, if you do, most head-to-head leagues will have daily transactions. Some of them will make you do waivers every night. Some of them are just kind of like first come, first serve on wires. And so that's where I like to, like, if I have a pitcher and he already threw and I'm going to drop him, I might not make that move in the morning unless there's like a hitter I have to claim. I might wait till lineups start coming out and see who's playing, who's not playing. What position do I need to fill? Oh my God, both my shortstops are on the bench. I don't have a shortstop. Okay, I'm going to drop that pitcher for a shortstop. I don't really care if it's the greatest player in the world. Is that guy starting, and is he going to get me 4 at bats because I could get stats? Then I'll put that guy into my lineup. So you really need to I think you need to play your cards close to the vest and wait a little bit too.
Yeah, it's about looking ahead, just knowing where your guys are every single day. Like I had a bye week in a daily set league last week, so I spent the whole weekend picking up enough guys who had my at bats on Monday. Yesterday, after those guys played on Monday, I dropped them to get more pitching, and I'm going to do the same thing on Thursday. Knowing which positions you don't have covered on Monday and Thursday, because those are the primary off days. Knowing your guys' platoon splits on your roster, and then just making those adjustments so you get as many at bats as possible every single day, but you're not clogging things up in a way that you can't defend against.
Yeah, but the answer to that is absolutely using bench spots for hitters, because you want to have that roster flexibility. And you may not need, if you're loading up on pitchers early in the week, you may not need pitching
in the weekend
later, right? You don't know if you're going to need pitching on a Monday or a Tuesday. You need to see how the matchup shakes out to decide, do I need starting? Do I need a closer? Do I need a sneaky win? Do I need strikeouts? Whatever. And that will help you determine how to attack and how to shape the rest of your roster.
Yep.
But that's going to do it for us today. Good little 45-minute, mostly Mets talk. But we got a lot of talk about 2025. Just a heads up, what's coming down the pike. Again, we are still doing the Rotoworld baseball show, our podcast. We're going to be looking at a lot of 2025 stuff coming up. We're going to have some mock drafts, and so we're going to go through some of that. We're going to have some awards talk in the offseason. We're going to be looking at obviously where position players going to, who are the top free agents, who are this, that. James and I might pop on a Q&A as we get toward the winter meetings and things like that, and we're starting to do kind of early draft and holds, or people are making keeper decisions, things of that nature. So we will still be around. Make sure that you are following both of us on Twitter. I am at Samulski NYC. James is at James_Schiano. Our content is coming out, and every time that we do anything off-season related with the Rotoworld staff, we'll make sure we're kind of tweeting that out there. And that's, again, live mock drafts and things like that, where you can follow along as we're doing kind of early 2025 mocks, things of that nature. I know next week's show on the Rotoworld show, Scott Pianowski and I are going to try to draft the first round of a 2025 draft. So make sure you check that out. James is going to, I don't know if he knows it yet, but he's going to be on some of the end of season shows as we do some of the postseason predictions and things like that. So keep it locked. We will be here throughout the off season, keep giving you that content. Good luck in the playoffs. Good luck in your final weeks of Roto, and we'll catch you later on the Fantasy Baseball Q&A.